So, first of all, a couple of things. Don't forget, well, shouldn't say don't forget. This is the first time you've been told this. But the last day to turn in any missing or late work is going to be Friday, January 15th, which is not this Friday, but the following Friday. Okay, and don't be that person that comes the following Monday and says, "Hey, can I turn this in?" Because the answer will be no, you cannot. All right. Also, don't forget to do your attendance. We have more people than I can count, which isn't really saying a whole lot, but we have a lot of people that have not done attendance yet. All right. So make sure that you get in there and get that attendance done. All right. So to kind of start class off, we're going to do a little bit of a review today. Um, the review, you might remember, and this is really important to understand, kind of where we're coming from. We've talked about events leading to the Revolutionary War. We talked about, that a long time ago. And then we talked about, the Revolutionary War, and then after the Revolutionary War, we talked about this document called the Articles of Confederation. Well, the Articles of Confederation just did not work. And the question is, and this is your question that you were going to start class off with today, is why did the Articles of Confederation not work? Because if you remember, Mr. Fair talked about this. The Articles of Confederation did do a lot of good stuff. It established what was called the Northwest Ordinance, and that was basically how new states were going to be added to the Union. And it also actually forbade slavery in that Northwest territory too, which was it was north of the Ohio River, in the territory that we're in right now. Let's see, what else did the Articles of Confederation do? Um, it also established this kind of reciprocation of laws between states, which means that some states, that if a law is established in one state, or somebody does something in one state, like if I got my driver's license in Wisconsin and I drove down to Illinois, my Wisconsin driver's license is still valid there. Kind of this reciprocating law type of thing. So, the Articles of Confederation did do a lot of good things, but there was some problem, some overarching problem that just said, hey, the founding fathers said we can't fix this thing. We have to do away with it. What was that problem? That is your question. What do we got in there, Mr. Fair? We got. And Clara Krantz has just told me I screwed up attendance. Um, so tell you what, it's all good. All right, don't worry about that today. I messed up the attendance. Hey, once again, don't worry about attendance. I marked everybody. Everybody is going to be present today. All right? Just don't worry about it. Wasn't compatible. Okay, so we are going headlong into the Constitution now. Now, how this is going to work, just so everybody's kind of on the same page here, we're going to go through the Constitution, and we're going to go through it article by article, okay, and section by section. Here's the thing. When we look at the Constitution, there's articles, and you can see on the bottom, that bottom bullet there. And then within those articles, there's sections. Within those sections, there's clauses. And so by going in and kind of diving into this, we're going to be able to actually kind of investigate this structure of this government. And remember, that's what the Constitution actually is, at least the first three articles to the Constitution, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. It's actually kind of the Founding Fathers set this structure up. Because remember, they had just gotten rid of the Articles of Confederation, so they need to actually put together this new government. And so when we go through this, that's what we're going to be really looking at, is we're going to be looking at the responsibilities and restrictions of each branch of government. Okay, so I'm assuming the I'm assuming the Constitution, at least the framework of the Constitution, is new to everybody. All right, so here is kind of a quick guide for you. Okay, the Constitution basically consists of a couple of different things. The preamble. Okay, the preamble is the first thing. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And then there's, like I said, it's broken down into articles. All of Article 1 deals with the legislative branch. Now, when we talk about the legislative branch, that's Congress. Okay, well, when we talk about Congress, it's also the Senate and the House of Representatives. Okay, I kind of refer to both of them as Congress. Article 2 just deals with the executive branch. And when we talk about the executive branch, basically we're talking about the president. And we'll talk more about that in a couple days when we get to Article 2. And then Article 3. Article 3 has to do with the judicial branch. Okay, and that's basically the Supreme Court, the court system. Okay, so you can see the little graphic there. You can see how the Constitution breaks it all up, just kind of like how I explained it to you. And then there's Articles 4 through 7, and they're miscellaneous. I mean, they're there's like Article 5 has to do with amending the Constitution. But really, when you want to look at just the structure of it, you're looking at Articles 1, 2, and 3. Okay? We will spend a little bit of time on Articles 4 through 7. All right, so the first thing is what we call the preamble. The preamble to the Constitution. You've probably heard this before, maybe just at least parts of it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. I had that memorized, Mr. Fair, right off my top of my head. All right, so that's the preamble. Now, an easy way to remember where the preamble is if you understand what the word pre, or the prefix pre is. The prefix pre stands for the beginning. I don't know what amble is. I think amble is a way to walk. Yes, a slow walk. So okay, so I guess it's before the slow walk of writing the Constitution, they wrote the preamble. That's what I'm going to go with. So to talk about actually we're going to actually take a look at how the preamble is broken down, because every word in that is really important, believe it or not. Every phrase means something. And to tell you what those phrases mean, here is Mr. Fair.
First paragraph of the Constitution, and it's sort of like kind of the high ideals of the Constitution that the framers thought would be a good idea to sort of introduce the Constitution to the people at the time, but as we're going to learn, also for posterity, forever. And so it's when we get into it just in a little bit here, and we start looking at the kind of like the meat and potatoes or the nuts and bolts of it, it's much more dry. But this is sort of the high-minded part of the Constitution preamble. So it starts off with "We the people." Okay, you've probably seen that phrase before, heard that phrase. It's when you look at a draft of the Constitution, it's the big type that you can kind of see in the background here, "We the people," and really it just means it's like saying this is what a democracy is. Democracy is about people having power, people having sovereignty, which means power or authority, and that's where the power should always come from, right? And we know that through elections and through participating in government, etc. In order to form a more perfect union, this is the next phrase, form a more perfect union. Now it sounds kind of weird, how can you be more than perfect? But it's kind of, I guess, just an old-fashioned, or the way they would have said it then. And here the key word really is union, right? And this gets back to the idea that there wasn't a very strong union of states during the Articles of Confederation. The problem was they didn't have that strong union, and so they said from now forward we want to always be striving to make this union of states stronger as we go, and therefore make the country stronger, make the government stronger, keep us together. We know, and we're going to learn about, how that union broke apart for 4 very tenuous years for the Civil War, but then came back together. Okay? So that's to form a more perfect union. And then the next one is to establish justice. Okay? Here they're just talking about, establishing a system of rules and laws that aren't controlled by, one singular person like a king, where the king says, well, this is going to be the rule, and I'm going to enforce it, and you can't argue with me. That's obviously not the system we live in. We need to have a rule of laws, and if you break a law or are accused of breaking a law, then you have, recourse, and you can go through a system, and hopefully you'll be judged fairly with justice. Now, have we lived up to that for all people at all times? No, we haven't, but these are the ideals that we strive towards. Next one, to ensure domestic tranquility. Okay, again, you got to kind of look at the words to try to decipher some of these. Tranquil, that word means peace. Domestic means like your house, or you're within your home. So here they're talking, one of the rules or the goals of this government will be to make sure that it's a peaceful society, that people aren't fighting each other, that we have systems in place so we can work out our differences without getting, violent, basically. Okay? So they're saying that the Constitution is going to work on that, and the government's going to do that. The government's also going to do, and this is really the number one thing that any government tries to do, provide for the common defense, which means protecting against foreign invaders. That's how they would have been thinking about them at the time, the British coming back and trying to attack the United States, which they did, or the French maybe, or the Spanish. So they realize that any government is going to have some sort of military to defend against any foreign invader. Now today, it's not just military, it's not just countries that could attack us. In fact, that's the least way, or the most unlikely way it happens. Now it's like cyber attacks or terrorism or something like that. Okay? But still, the government should be defending the people. To promote the general welfare. Okay? This you might have heard the word welfare, but basically they're talking here about a government should be in support of an economy that gives opportunities to people, so that people can live with some sort of prosperity. So they have an opportunity to, have enough money or enough resources to help their families eat and have a house and, have life, that kind of stuff. Pretty basic. To secure the blessings of liberty, so that's of freedom, to ourselves, but most importantly to our posterity. That word posterity means those that come afterwards, the future generations. So here they're just talking about, we're going to create this government, and we hope it works, and we hope it works for, us, and for the people that are living in the country at that time, 1787. But most importantly, it has to last for generations to come. And it has, obviously, because we're talking about essentially the same Constitution that they created with 27 amendments? Why am I forgetting the numbers? Yeah, 27 changes to it, right? Okay? So, again, the preamble has these big ideas in it, lays out sort of the big goals of this government. We'll get into the specifics of how the government is set up here in a minute, but that's the preamble. Okay? All right, so we have 2 videos. We're going to watch the last one, or the second one here at the end of the class. This first one, you might have, maybe you've seen it, maybe you've heard of Schoolhouse Rocks, an older group that put out these informational, fun, educational videos back in the 1970s, I think. And this one's all on the preamble. So what we want you to not only listen to this, but be watching your screen and look for the symbolism as you hear the words. They're basically going to be going through the preamble that we just talked about. But look at and we'll stop it to kind of key you in on some things. But look at the symbolism, the pictures, the depictions, the graphics, whatever you want to call them, as they go through the words. Okay?
Take that back.
Yeah, I guess so.
Ready? Okay, so that was the first. Okay, so that was the first verse, and I want you to kind of take a look. Mr. Fair mentioned this. Look for the symbolism. Look what's going on in the video, because here's the thing. If we were just to show you this video, it probably would not have made. It probably makes more sense to you now. Now that Mr. Fair kind of went through a couple of, what the words actually mean. He kind of linked that up with the images here. But notice that at the beginning here, the first part of this, they're all kind of dressed in, late 18th century clothes or so. So watch what happens here with the second verse. The second verse, they're going to be singing the same words. All right, now watch the imagery here in the second part. Sure. Okay, so here's where last time during that verse, you saw that there's ensuring domestic tranquility. There's two people dueling, and here we have just kind of like a modern day argument between baseball players and an umpire. But see, that's the point here is that we start to see how this Constitution, this thing, that's what they're trying to point out here is that this Constitution, this thing was written back in 1787, but yet a lot of these phrases, this preamble especially, this still pertains to things today. Go ahead, Mr. Fair, play the next part here. We're going to stop it with the little girl number. Okay, so those words were important to ourselves and our posterity. So here's where we start looking at the image on the screen there. You see the mom, okay? Now go back, and last time we saw the voting booth, right? They're writing down a name or something like that and sticking it in a big old wooden box. Again, in late 1800s. Here we have a much more modern voting booth, although this is probably 1970, but the mom there, not only represents, the next generation, hundreds of years after the writing of the Constitution, but the girl there actually represents the next generation yet. So, so not only does this Constitution work for this generation, the blue scarfed mom's generation, but the idea is that it works for the next generation as well. This is what the founding fathers are really trying to work towards, is a document that doesn't only work in 1787 and maybe a couple years after that, maybe to 1820 or something like that. No, they wanted something that was going to hold this country together for generations to come. And that's what the people from Schoolhouse Rock are kind of getting across to us here by using these different time periods, by using this different imagery, is that this document was able to change over time, and it's really kind of the magic behind it because of its flexibility. And we'll talk about this when we get to amending the Constitution. But when we look at the flexibility of this document, it has been able to bring this country together, to run this country for generations. All right, Mr. Fair, why don't we finish her up here? Yeah, I just love that imagery because it's not only, not only could it run a small 13-state country, but it could also, as the country expanded, it could change, it could fit with the times, could fit with the size of the country, could fit with the different changing needs the country had. So that's, it's a cute kids video, but if you really look at it, there's a lot of powerful images there. Good? All right. So that's the preamble. So we're going to be moving on to now. Remember, so we're going to break this down into articles and sections. Okay, and one of the things again you're going to have to keep in mind is where we have come from. Okay, I mean from a historical standpoint, but also from a classroom standpoint as well, where we've come from. So go back to back before the Constitutional Convention, back before the Revolutionary War. Go back to those events that were leading up to the Revolutionary War, because we're going to be going back that far. Because a lot of those events that led up to the Revolutionary War, they were fresh in the minds of the Founding Fathers. And they're the reason a lot of things that are in this document. I mean, take for example, that last bullet point there. Live in the state you represent. Okay, so this is just qualifications for somebody that's a congressman, for somebody that's a member of the House of Representatives. Okay, they have to be 25 years old, they have to be a citizen of the United States for 7 years, and then they have to live in the state they represent. That kind of, I guess, to us is a no-brainer. Of course, yeah, you have to. But remember, that wasn't always the case, because if we go back to this whole concept of no taxation without representation, we see that wasn't the way the Crown viewed it. See, the Crown, when these colonists said, hey, we're being taxed and we're not being represented, we need to have a colonist in Parliament. Well, the Crown, King George III, said, no, you don't, because the people in Parliament, they represent all people, not just where they live. But that's not the way the colonists saw it, and that was a big issue. No taxation without representation. You have to be represented. So that's really what this last part, live in the state that you represent. And now think about it. Do you want, I don't know, Mr. Fair, do you want somebody from Florida representing you here in Wisconsin? Well, if the issue came up about like salt for roads, they might not see a need for that, right?
Or farming for cranberries.
Right. So they have different needs in Florida than we have in Wisconsin. You can't really understand the need of what we need here in Wisconsin unless you live here. We can't understand the needs of somebody who lives in Florida unless you actually live there. So that's a huge reason why, a representative has to live in that state that they represent. It's also, that historical sense. All right. That's Article 1. Now, we're going to continue Article 1, Section 2, because Article 1, Section 2, the whole thing is about the House of Representatives, okay? All of Article 1, Section 2 is about the House of Representatives. The next part of it goes on to talk about what's called a term limit. A term limit. A term is how long somebody serves, okay? So, for a member of the House, a term is 2 years. Every year, every 2 years, they're elected. Okay, and you might remember we talked about, go back to again, the New Jersey plan, which called for equal representation, and the Virginia plan, which called for proportional representation, and then the Great Compromise was kind of a compromise between those two things, and called for 2 houses of Congress. Right here is the House of Representatives, one of the houses of Congress, and it's this House of Congress that's based off the Virginia plan, that proportional representation plan. And it says, how many representatives a state gets is going to be based on the population, based on proportional representation. And so it kind of spells out how you do this. This is kind of the original wording for the Constitution. It says count the number of people, count the number of 3 persons, then you add 3/5 of all other persons. Hey, that sounds familiar, the 3/5 thing. I wonder where that came from. Huh. All right, 3/5. And who are these other people that the Constitution refers to? Huh, I wonder. All right. Obviously, that comes from the 3/5 compromise. When we talk about, if you go back to the 3/5 compromise, this is where this comes in here, okay? 3/5 of all other people, those are the slaves, obviously. Okay, and then it says also, do not count American Indians. Now, the reason that American Indians were not counted is because their tribal lands that were set aside were actually counted as kind of independent land of Wisconsin, where they could make their own laws. And so they were actually technically, until the passage of the 16th Amendment, they were actually technically part of, I guess, a different country, another country. They weren't considered U.S. citizens, I guess. All right. All right. So, like I said, there's some changes though that happened in this, obviously. Oh no, yep. Okay. Oh, before we get to that, here is my outdated map. You thought that the video that we just showed you from the 1970s Schoolhouse Rock thing was dated? Okay, so I messed up on this. I didn't even realize it until Mr. Fair pointed it out to me. But this is a congressional map of Wisconsin. Okay. Now, here's the problem with this congressional map. This is pre-2000, because during the 2000 census, other states had grown faster than Wisconsin, and because of that, proportional representation, because of that, Wisconsin actually lost a seat in the House. So, before 2000, Wisconsin actually had 9 seats in the House, or 9 districts. Since 2000, though, they have 8 seats in the House. They have 8 districts. And okay. All right. So yep, that is the new map as opposed to leave that old map in there. All right. Now this is going to be important when we start talking about districts and how many representatives they have, because that's going to lead to, and you might remember this. This is going to lead to the Electoral College. Okay. So Article 1, Section 2. Oh, here are the changes I was talking about. So obviously the 3/5 of all other people being counted, the slaves being counted. Obviously, that was eliminated with the 13th and the 14th Amendment. 13th Amendment eliminated slavery, and the 14th Amendment made those of African nativity citizens. I think that's how they had phrased that there. And then they also began to count American Indians with the 16th Amendment. So some other changes. Now, we said, and maybe you remember this when Mr. Fair was talking about the Electoral College in early mid-November, but he kind of went through how the electoral votes were established. And one of the things that we talked about was the number of representatives in the House of Representatives. And we said there's always going to be 435 members, always, 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 unless the Constitution changes, but always, always, always. And those numbers, those members of the House are just kind of shifted around depending on population of different states. Well, it didn't always used to be that way. See, it used to be based off of the population of a state, and if you read the wording, that's what it actually says. And originally there was one representative for every 30,000 people. So you have 30,000 people in your state, you get one representative. You have 60,000, you get two representatives. You have 90,000, you get three representatives. You have 120,000, you get four representatives. I think that was right? Okay. My math is right on that. Anyway, so the wording actually changes after this, and it was like one representative for every 40,000 people in your state, and so it changes. And then all of a sudden, the Congress in 1929 finally said, look, we can't keep on changing that number. We're going to go with 435 members, and that's it. If we were to actually use, I put this down kind of at the bottom down there, if we were to actually use those numbers as the Constitution originally states, one representative for every 30,000 persons living in the state, we would have 11,000 members to the House of Representatives today. So, talk about, slogging through a bill nowadays. I can't imagine, with 11,000 people, how slow a bill would go through. So those are some changes that were made. Okay, now I said that what happens is they have those 435 members, right, and they kind of shift around according to the population. And you would think it's kind of easy. I mean, I don't know, you take 435 divided by the population, and that's so many people, Actually, it's a complex mathematical formula, and it's called the apportionment process. So there's a little bit of like I said, a complex mathematical formula to figure out how many seats each state gets. Right, here's a quick little video that talks about that. Hey, where's that old map?
So it's coming up, probably gone. It's coming up on the internet.
Yeah.
That is place there, but you can just.
Yeah, I'm not worried. Oh, this is our last. That's it. Yeah, because we're into questions now. We're going to end like 5 minutes early. Right. We have until 2:35. Gerrymandering. Do you want to bring up that Texas slide quick? Uh-oh. You ready? All right. In this season of giving, it's a gift from our founding fathers, the apportionment process. All right. So, one of the things that we didn't talk about here was with the with the district aligning. Okay, so if we go, hey, any chance you can go back to the Wisconsin district map there, Mr. Fair? So, here's the thing. If we go back to that district map, we're going to see that, you know, oh, that is the old one. Huh, okay, we probably got to restart that paradigm. Okay. But anyway, we'll just take a look at this district. So you can see that there's not like just squares. Okay, it's not just like, here we're just going to kind of, make, I don't know, 9 vertical lines or horizontal lines or whatever. We're going to section off Wisconsin. There's a lot of kind of politicking that goes into those lines and where they're drawn. Some of it has to do with population. You look at look at Milwaukee down there. It's that little yellow dot down in southeastern Wisconsin. Well, that's because the population density is so much there that they're not going to have that big of a district. But it goes a little deeper than that. Sometimes politicians want to draw those lines that's going to favor their party. Okay, and this concept is a concept called gerrymandering. 2 minutes.
All right. So you might do a what in active in front of us. So you have to imagine, right here is the city of Houston. Okay, the city of Houston. So Houston's a big metropolitan area. So right in the middle of the city, that's the city of Houston. This green is one congressional district. Okay. Now, does it, just from a basic, does it make any sense, really, from a geographic standpoint or anything else, why the district would look like this? Going way up here and all the way around here. So if you were the congressperson of this district, you might live way up here, and then you have people you represent that live way down here. Okay? So this is the extreme of what's called gerrymandering, where I was kind of looking up stuff on to explain this.
I didn't explain the name, no.
Okay. This term comes from a guy named Elder Geary, the rest of Geary, way back in the beginning, at 50% of the Constitution. And she then went back and was involved in her state politics, and he was committee or whatever. When it was time in 1790 to do the census, they drew districts, and they were all over the place because politicians like to draw lines on a map where they think that there's going to be votes of people who live in places that will vote for them. Okay? And when he drew this map, it kind of looked like a salamander because he really had like a long twisting tail, and his last name is Gary, so they call it Gary. Really, technically called redistricting, but this is a prime example of how crazy it gets. Really, how it's not very democratic. But you see where whoever, I don't know, I have to think, but anyway, whoever is the representative in this district, basically he or she represents the suburbs of the district, on the outside, but not the city. So it doesn't make any geographic sense. It wasn't done out of in the best, ethical or moral reasons. It was done for political. Anyway, that's just a little. You can look up gerrymandering if you want. There's a lot out there. That's
Okay, so Mr. Fair, in the beginning we talked about the preamble, okay? And I have actually spent most of this class trying to memorize the preamble. All right, so I don't have it in front of me, do I? You don't see it, right? I'm not cheating? Okay. So, ready? Get me started. We the, sure. We the porcupines. We the pineapples. We the people. Okay, so that's our comedy routine. Here's a couple people that do that much better than we do. All right.
All right.